Hi class, here we are, chapter 10. It's on page 78 of your digital text that you will find in Google Classroom. Church the next morning was much as it always was, except that the Glengarrys, in their pew 3 back from ours, did not greet us as they usually did. I was sorry about that, but not very. My father had been right when he'd said I'd feel better after speaking my piece, and I didn't mind giving up a Sunday smile from the Glengarrys in the bargain. Betty, in a gingham shift over a white blouse with a Peter Pan collar, looked as sweet as a snap pea, but her eyes gave her away. I focused instead on the purple and yellow chrysanthemums clustered around the altar and the empty cross above it. The choir warbled out the hymns as usual. Mr. Simmons through his mighty nose, Mrs. Lancaster with a bigger hitch in her voice than our flatbed, and we all sang along in our various ways. Reverend Kinnell spoke at great length about the changing of the seasons, but I could not for the life of me make much sense of it. I was very grateful for a tiny pencil and offerings envelope stashed next to the hymnal on the pew back in front of me. I couldn't draw worth a hill of beans, but trying helped me pass the time. My grandfather, sitting next to me, looked envious as I spent much of the sermon drawing a horse. "Well, that's a fine dog, Annabelle," he whispered to me. When my mother took the envelope to add some coins for the collection, she smiled at the dog horse. "I hope the Reverend likes your offering, Annabelle," she said. So everything was fine, I thought, and whatever problems we had could wait for us to catch up with them. But as it turned out, they caught up with us when we left the church and found the constable waiting outside, the Glengarrys with him. Now, the constable is the police. Okay. The constable didn't wear a badge or carry a weapon, but the state police barracks were in Pittsburgh, and the nearest jail or courthouse was just as far away. So the constable took care of things as he could and called in the troops when they were needed, which was never, as far as I knew. We all liked him, Constable Oleska. He had a big face, red cheeks, not much hair, and an easy laugh. But one time at the county fair, I'd seen him wrap his arms around a farmer who'd had too much hard cider to drink and was actually stupid. Constable Oleska held him in place as if he were nothing but a corn shock until the farmer calmed down and went home to bed. So people took the constable seriously when he chose to be stern. He looked stern now. "Good morning, folks," he said. "I need a word. John, Sarah." My father opened up the door to our truck and shepherded my grandparents inside. To my brothers and me, he made a shooing motion, and we obliged him by scrambling up into the back of the truck. But we huddled as close to the conversation as we could. I couldn't hear everything they said, but I caught Toby's name, and Ruth's, and Mr. Ansel's. Betty did some of the talking, which made me mad, but my parents were there to speak for me, and I resigned myself to that. My mother's voice was most audible, since she quickly became upset with what the Glengarrys were saying. "Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty?" she said, a fair bit of heat in her voice, "and letting a person live however he lives." She had her fist on her hips. "Let's not be throwing the baby out with the bathwater," which was confusing to me since there was no baby involved in this as far as I could tell, nor any bathwater either, which was confusing. My father put a hand on her shoulder, but she ignored him. "Toby may be strange, but that's the end of it. You might make him more strange if you back him into a corner when he hasn't done anything wrong. Besides, you can't lock up a man because a girl says she saw him on a hillside, and a girl who's been up to no good at that." And then everyone was talking too loudly, and none of them in turn. My mother had clearly tired of the whole business and climbed into the back of the truck with us. My father got behind the wheel, started the engine, and calling, "Lily!" out the window. But my aunt stayed another moment, talking to the constable, nodding her bird-like head to what he replied before heading for her own car. I did not like the look on her face, something too close to happy, which was rare enough for Aunt Lily, and odder still, given the circumstances. Sunday dinner was usually a matter of saying grace and eating what we were served, little conversation. Reading up afterward, Aunt Lily went to her room to spend the afternoon in prayer and reflection, though sometimes a dance tune drifted from under her door. People occasionally came to call on Sundays. More often, we spent the day slowly, quietly, glad for a little peace and rest. But this Sunday was not like that. "I want you to stay far away from Betty Glengarry at school tomorrow," my mother said to my brothers and me after dinner as she dished out apple pie and poured cream over it. "Don't go near her, don't talk to her, and tell Mrs. Taylor if Betty does anything worrisome, anything at all." And to us, my father said, "When you get home, no more secrets." "Well, honestly," Aunt Lily said, "Annabelle, don't you think you might have been exaggerating a bit? Betty seems like a sweet, God-fearing girl to me, and she's brave enough to let us know what Toby's done, even though he's the most frightening thing in this country." "She hit me hard enough to leave a black bruise the size of a cucumber," I said. No way I could exaggerate black. Aunt Lily sat up straighter. "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor," she said sharply. But though it had been some time since Betty had swung that stick, I stood up and I bared my hip right there in front of everyone and let them see the mark that was still visible, still ugly enough. Aunt Lily looked away. She didn't say another word for the rest of the meal. After dinner was over and the redding up was done, my mother gathered the fixings for a poultice and made it while I watched. A handful of Russian comfrey leaves from her kitchen garden and boiling water mashed into hot paste, spooned into a clean rag, folded up into a neat square. She took me to my room, laid me on my side, and arranged the poultice on the bruise. "It doesn't hurt any more," I said. "Well, I know it hurts me to know it's there," she said. "This will clear it up altogether." What felt best about having my mother sit on the edge of my bed, her hand over the poultice to keep it warm. "I didn't bear false witness," I said. "I wouldn't do that. That means I didn't tell a lie. Okay? Oh, I know, Annabelle. Aunt Lily thinks she knows more than she does. Enough about that now." We sat quietly, and I felt a great distance between us, at the sound of my brothers downstairs, their Sunday pitch imperfect, noisy as any weekday. "What's going to happen to Toby?" I asked. My mother sighed. "Well, Constable Oleska doesn't have enough information to call the troopers and have Toby arrested, which is what the Glengarrys want him to do. He can't dismiss what Betty said, but he can't arrest Toby on the strength of that alone. Can't arrest him in any event, since that's for the troopers to decide and do. So he said he's going to talk to Andy about Betty's story, about being in the belfry, and he's going down to see Toby too. And maybe come talk to you a little about that other business with Betty. And try to figure out who strung that wire across the path. All that, though, I don't know in what order. Maybe talk to Toby tonight, even, or early tomorrow. I just don't know, Annabelle. But for now, all he wants is to talk to people and find out what's what." I tucked my hands under my cheek, tried to picture the constable knocking on the door of the Toby smokehouse, Imagine the look on Toby's face when he opened the door and found trouble on the other side. I don't believe what they're saying about Toby. He's not like that. Nor do I, Annabelle. But Constable Oleska is a fair man. I don't think he'll do anything but talk for now, which I feared might itself be too much. Toby had been a wanderer. I expected he might right now be thinking about leaving our hills for somewhere new.